Hello, dear ones, and greetings from the Center for Contemporary Mysticism. My name is Joe Irwin, and it's a joy to gather with you again to explore this amazing journey that we share. Today, we welcome internationally acclaimed animal activist and interspecies communicator Anna Breytenbach from South Africa, although she is now in Mallorca, Spain. And over the past several decades, she's been teaching and practicing and involved in conservation work and protection of lions and wolves, baboons, elephants, whales, dolphins, and much more. And so she's also a qualified and experienced master training facilitator, mentoring children and adults in nature awareness. So today, Anna is going to share her amazing work with us and explore how relationships among humans and other species might help us realize the oneness of all life and help to heal some of the separation sickness that is so prevalent in our society. So welcome, Anna. We are grateful for your time and honored to have you with us today.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and introduce Patricia. As many of you know, Patricia is our regular interviewer. She's an author, a former pastor, spiritual teacher, and host of the We Awakening podcast, and she also leads a number of companioning groups for those who are involved in the global awakening. Lastly, we'll take a moment and welcome you, each of you who is with us today. We're honored to have you here, whether you're joining us here in the live session or watching later on our YouTube channel. If you're new to the center, be sure and check out our website, simply contemporarymysticism.org, where you'll find hundreds of resources, videos, groups, past speakers, and lots of great resources. Remember, our goal is to be a partner with you. So if you feel that what we're doing is important, we encourage you to get involved, volunteer, join, support in whatever way you feel called to help us continue this work. And remember, the last thing, after our interview with Anna, we'll have a Q&A session, which follows that, and you'll have an opportunity to come on screen and ask a question or offer a thought and be able to dialogue one-on-one with Anna or Patricia. And so make a note. If you go through our time together and something pops in your mind, make a note of it. And when we come to the Q&A, you can click the raise your hand button and have a chance to talk one-on-one with Anna. So now, without further ado, Patricia and Anna, will turn it over to you, and I'll be back in just a bit for our Q&A.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you, Anna. I've been looking forward to our conversation for a very long time. We got you booked quite some time ago. So I would like to ask you to share with us how you came to this ability to communicate with non-human species. Is this something that you were always able to do, or is it something that you discovered or cultivated, learned? How did it happen?
That's a great question, and I think of all those possibilities, probably the best would be to say that I discovered the latent potential and ability that is within all of us. That in modern life we don't pay attention to the more intuitive ways of moving around or engaging with others. We usually have to wait for some sort of crisis or emergency for our instinct to kick in, when our survival is really under threat or something. And as busy as our lives are, and as much as our minds tend to lead the show during our waking hours, we don't make space for those, unfortunately, now more old-fashioned concepts like gut feelings and hunches, or just being with the flow, spontaneous action. But all of those things, where all of those states in which our intuition expresses, is the place, or the human faculties within which our connection with other life forms just is, and always is, whether we know it or not. When we consciously pay attention to what's there, then we sort of step into this dialogue, or into this connection. So I rediscovered it in my adult life, and I didn't have a particularly wild childhood or anything, just a very ordinary suburban upbringing. Always loved animals and felt for them, and would cry when there was an animal shelter advert on the TV, and these sorts of things. So the compassion for animals was there, but I didn't have some amazing, wild jungle upbringing, running around as lions in, the Southern African wilderness or anything. And so I say that because it doesn't require any special path. It's just about coming back into the heart and being able to connect when we put our attention there. And it's no different than how everybody in the indigenous cultures around the world used to be deeply connected with each other, but also very much with their surroundings, with their environment, with the earth upon which they walked, and the plants that they foraged for and harvested, and the animals that they tracked and lived in union with. So yeah, I discovered this while learning my tracking skills, while doing my tracking training outside of Seattle in the US. And what started out as a sort of fun way to learn about North American animals and what they were up to when we followed their footprints quickly turned into a most startling experience of seemingly getting information about the animals directly from their footprints, long after they were no longer on the scene, of course. And I kept on getting information seemingly by just connecting with the footprints, information that would later prove to be true. And I could find no way to explain why this was happening. There was no scientific way to explain why I was getting information about the animal who'd left their footprint maybe a day or two even before. And so then I did my research and discovered that at the very least I wasn't the only crazy person who was seeing things, and discovered this whole field called interspecies telepathic communication. And in the US, where I was living at the time, there are hundreds of teachers, thousands of communicators. And so I tuned in and chose who to study with to further my relearning and remembering. And at the time, the Assisi International Animal Institute was run by Jerry Ryan, who left her body last year. And I chose them because of the three foundational philosophies through which they helped us remember. And the one was the Buddhist principles of compassion for all life. The other was the wisdom of the native peoples and what was common to their kinship with all life. And the third pillar that my very analytical and skeptical mind needed was the new physics, or the quantum physics of it all. So it was the perfect match for me to find a way to understand it better.
Yeah, I appreciate your describing that it's about centering in the heart, because I think in Western, especially European, oriented cultures, we're very much indoctrinated or trained to live from the thinking mind, and to interact with our surroundings from the thinking mind. Did you, when you first started getting these, so it sounds like you really began to discover this gift when you were tracking, and you were sort of spontaneously getting this intuitive information about the animal from their tracks. And I'm going to ask this because I think a lot of us sometimes get intuitive impressions, but we question them. We wonder, is this something that we're making up? So how did you come to trust what you were receiving? And is it still, do you still find this is like a discernment thing, or are you so clicked in at this point that you always know that what you're getting is accurate?
For me, the journey into trusting it was the longest and the most difficult aspect to it. And thankfully, the institute I was studying through required us to do case studies for certification. The good old sort of double-blind case studies, working with animals we didn't know, just people we didn't know. So we had no pre-existing, information. So, and then those would get evaluated, based on our communication, and then feedback from the animal's person, the person who lived with their pet. And that's how we got coached and mentored to improve our accuracy. And those were very helpful for my doubting mind. But it took me a long time to trust that this was really as robust as it actually is. Especially as, a lot of domestic pets anyway, they have lives involved with us humans and have behaviors and activities and likes and wants and dislikes that that can be fairly generic. So it was very easy for my doubting mind to just write off information I was getting as, oh, well, it's probably just obvious, or, or suggestive. So I think it probably took a couple of things. Firstly, it took one or two stark instances where there was no way I could find any excuse or reason for the information I got, other than it must have been telepathy, and I'll give an example shortly. And the other thing that really was important was for me to come more into a heart space with it, because the mind was the one that was rebelling to this. And if I just resided in the heart with it and stayed in the heart space, literally in the heart space with the animal, whether or not they were in my presence, it allowed the greater knowing and the wisdom of my own heart center to prevail, no matter what my mind was saying, how my mind was complaining. An example of one of those strong moments was when I was communicating remotely across distance with a Rottweiler. And one of the standard questions we had to ask these cats and dogs was, is there anything missing in your life? And you can imagine that typically we get answers during our studies around wanting more food or different kinds of food or more walks and all of those things that these animals were genuinely wishing for, but could easily be written off as, reasonable to assume. For this particular Rottweiler, when I asked that question, and behind my closed eyes that I keep closed to avoid the distractions coming from my surroundings, visually speaking, behind my closed eyes, I got the brief mental flash of a bald eagle flying through the sky, and then just a split second of the upper part of a man's arm, quite a well-built sort of bodybuilder kind of arm. And I honestly would have completely ignored that. I was too shy to want to give that feedback to the dog's lady, to his female caregiver, because I didn't understand it at all. But the protocol was we had to report everything. And when I did give her that feedback over the phone, she burst into tears, because her young husband in his early 30s had died a year before in a car accident. And he had had a tattoo of a bald eagle's head on his bicep.
Oh, wow. And
so the dog was obviously missing the man of the house and missing this person. Mm. And that was what was unique about the person, and that's what I was shown. So there was no way that any chance or or suggestion could have been at play there. So things like that made me have to know that it was true at least some of the time, and it allowed me to then work on myself. And that's really been the journey, and is the ongoing journey, is the ongoing work on self, to step out of the way, to get out of the way so that I can be clear on just what is. And so I don't have this kind of it's not like this person is confident, but I'm now all the time. But there's a certain quiet stability to just knowing when something is there for an animal. It's more like the background condition or the feeling in me when I know that something is really true. And it's not that the mind doesn't still want to play tricks or throw me alternative possibilities and other ideas, or my own knowledge of a certain species or an animal can get in the way. It can cloud what is true for that being in that moment. But there's a different quality to what my mind is making up or thinking or considering. There's a different quality internally than just that quiet isness, and sometimes the much more subtle isness of what the intuition is showing me. And the mind carries a big old stick and tends to speak more loudly on the inner landscape. And so I now choose to pay more attention to what is more subtle. And I don't bother fighting the mind. As Carl Jung says, what you resist persists. So if you're going to fight these interruptions or the monkey mind, you're just giving your power and your attention to that instead of the moment. And the last thing to say about this is that practice really does quickly build the muscle, like any muscle. So practicing with animals very quickly builds this muscle that we humans have let get a little bit weak in modern times. And that creates more clarity as well.
And one can sense just that inner calm in you that has been cultivated clearly over a long time. And this example of the Rottweiler who was missing, this fellow who had the tattoo, is this sort of then information that you are able to convey back to an animal so that they understand what became of the person that they're missing?
Yes, yes, indeed. Animals will always know if a person or somebody is in body still or not. That they have grieving, they have mourning, and particularly if it happened when it was sudden, or they didn't get to integrate it. Very similar, as for us humans, some of those traumas can be very similar for domestic animals who live close to us, and for wild ones. And I've worked also once with an elephant in a zoo in Johannesburg, who's she had given birth in the zoo some time before, when her calf was several months old. It developed a serious health condition that they couldn't treat successfully in the zoo. So they had to take the elephant calf away to a specialist veterinary hospital where the calf died. And at that time, the mom back in the zoo began behaving hysterically. So she knew her calf had died, but she didn't get to be with the body. The body was never brought back. And she started, acting out in quotation marks, as the zookeepers would call it, acting out in all sorts of ways. Because she hadn't been able to, on a sensory level, go through the mourning, the grieving, the coming to terms with it physically. So they do know when one has left, but they often need, just explaining, how that happened, or what the new situation is. And of course, animals, being as sensitive as they are and tuned into us, they're also picking up on how the humans and other beings are feeling about, a sudden change like that as well. And they miss their companions. It doesn't mean they're confused. People speak about their dogs or cats who lose another animal in the household, going back and looking, at the now empty cat bed or dog bed where their friend used to be, or going to the same part of the garden where the other one used to hang out. And it doesn't mean they're confused and looking for, as in searching for, the other one. It's more an act of remembrance, and going back and checking in with that energy field and feeling again where the imprint of that one, who spent a lot of time there, that imprint is there energetically in the environment. And it's this lovely act of remembrance, of just going and hanging out in that space, while it's still quite fresh.
Yeah. When I was growing up, we had a dog and we had a cat, and they became fast friends. And the dog died very suddenly of a heart attack. And for years, maybe for the rest of her life, every now and then, our cat would go down to the basement where the dog had died and just howl, just yowl. It's just like this cry of grief. It's really, really poignant.
Yeah.
So when you are just taking this example of the Rottweiler, if you wanted to share with the dog what had happened to this man, how would you go about doing that? Is it like you show an image, or you imagine something like an image in your mind, or what are you doing? What are you experiencing?
It does depend on the specific data I'm trying to convey. So if it is things to do with, space and things like the car and an accident and so on, then I will imagine in my mind, mental images or quantum holographs, and then just imagine or intend to project that towards the animal. Same if you're trying to be helpful to an animal or guide them in a certain way that involves them having to do something with their bodies, then I would conjure up a mental image. So this happened on a farm where a fire had broken out. I was at a friend's farm for the day, and a fire broken out on the neighboring farm. And her own horses, who run free in the field, were panicked, and understandably the fire was advancing on them. And we had to open an unusual place in the fence for them to be able to come through to safety. They were running around looking for the usual gate to be opened, but that wasn't too dangerous a location. So we had to convey to the horses how they needed to move and in which direction they needed to move. So what I do is imagine myself in their perspective, literally. Although me, the human, is standing facing the field and the whole scene, I imagine it in a mirror way, that I am the horse looking back at me. And so I send them the mental image of myself standing where I am. I look behind me to see what's behind me, and then I project to them the mental image of me standing in front of the white wall of the house and with the trees that are so tall. And then I let them know they need to come towards me. So I continue with the mental image of them coming closer, but I also invoke the sense of them needing to move their bodies, forward, the forward momentum. And in this case, from my perspective, they were off to my, to my right, and the safe place for them to come through was to my right. So I had to, in the mirror image, I had to tell them to come to their left and actually feel as if I were in the horse's body and I was leaning to the left and turning slightly to the left, and show them the mental image of the opening in the fence, that this was the place to go for, even though it was unfamiliar to them. And as a motivation for them to do something that is unusual and unfamiliar, which horses usually don't like, as a motivation, there's also the feeling of the positive result should they do what I'm suggesting. And that feeling is safety. I imagine less smoke smell and imagine greater distance, the feeling of more calmness, the feeling of safety and stability and relief. So it's a mixed bag, circumstantially.
Wow. This is my immediate impression is wow, because you are drawing on so many aspects of who you are as a human, of your imaginative capacities. You're drawing on your somatic sensations and conveying like the movement of the body to the left, the emotional feeling of what results from that movement of the body. So I'm just really struck with how holistic it is and all-encompassing it is, all of the gifts that you are drawing on in that experience.
It really is holistic. And now hearing you summarize it so well, I would add another element, which is the empathy. And if empathy can be defined as knowing and understanding the other's truth from their perspective, and I really like, stepping into their shoes, so to speak, or into their paws. When that comes in, you really do allow yourself to see it from their perspective, and some greater wisdom takes over beyond my human stored experience and my human history. It's sort of easy to translate into other mammals, but let's say I'm trying to guide an insect, who's drowning, closer to the edge of the pond so I can reach it with the stick to help it. Insect is absolutely tiny, plus they have eyes, in different places on their heads than us binocular humans do. So with that empathy, that willingness to step into their perspective, even if it's only an imagined act, that's fine. I imagine being an insect with compound vision. So I imagine that my visual sense, looking up, this vast expanse of water, and looking up and seeing this looming giant of a human at the edge, I imagine seeing that in compound vision, which I sort of make up to be this mosaic-like impression. So I imagine that I'm this insect seeing this mosaic of the scene, and even though it might be really scary towards, to come closer to this looming object, this giant of a human, because humans are usually insensitive and unconscious of insects and crushing them, even unwittingly. And there's this empathy to be in their perspective, and everything becomes relative. It's like being in a sort of, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids movie or something. You literally empathically step into their perspective so you can give very specific guidance that's relevant to their physical realities, and can encourage them to do something that they ordinarily wouldn't feel comfortable with.
Beautiful. I want us to watch a clip of you working with an animal. This is I'm sure some of the people on our call have seen this clip, but it might be really interesting to watch it now with this context that you've just shared with us of what's going on inside of you when you are engaged in this kind of communication. And this is a clip from, I don't know, when was this, Anna? Of
2009 it was filmed.
2009. So you were working with a black leopard in South Africa. Let me pull up this.
This black leopard, called Diablo, had been rescued from a European zoo where he'd been abused. That experience had made him suspicious and vicious.
What happened?
And vicious. All he did was sit in his night shelter and snarl at anyone who came close to him. 6 months in, and Jörg was at a loss as to how to deal with this cat.
That whole atmosphere there was a vibe of aggression and of I hate you and I will kill you. And you know, the one encounter I had with him, he sent me to hospital 1 bite, 1 week.
Here, I thought, was the perfect case. If Anna could get this animal to change his behavior and become well adjusted, then I would have no choice but to acknowledge that she was in dialogue with animals. It took me some time, however, to convince Jörg to bring in Anna.
He's a dangerous cat. He's very, very dangerous. He's towards me and towards everybody else. In my opinion, the chances of an animal communicator changing that, it'll take a lot to convince me. I honestly do not believe that an animal can talk to a human or communicate with a human. I've had animals my whole life. We give them commands, we give them instructions, and they do it as we habituate them, basically. But I'm very skeptical to think that an animal like Diablo will communicate or can communicate with humans. I am desperate, however. I do not want to lose him.
I made sure that Anna had no information on Diablo or his history before she came to speak to the black leopard. I was nervous to see what would happen, as this animal never let anyone near his night shelter without a lot of snarling and growling. But the minute he saw Anna, he calmed down and let her kneel right outside and look at him.
This beautiful black leopard that you've asked us to communicate with is very overawed by his new surroundings, having come from a very cramped and stressful place for him. That this place has been provided for him, but he's been quite conditioned by a very unfortunate past. He doesn't want much to do with humans as a result. He's immensely powerful, and I mean not just physically, which you well know and respect, but he's immensely powerful with a wisdom and an energetic presence and personality that is far bigger than anyone has ever appreciated about him before. And he commands a certain amount of respect for that. Again, not in a needy way, but really just out of, by virtue of who he is as a being. There's a very particular thing about his name, Diablo. He wants that name changed because he doesn't like the associations with it, the blackness, the darkness, the diabolical. And when asking him about his past before coming here, he shows concern for 2 young cubs that were next to him. He's asking what happened to them with a great sense of care and concern.
We actually forgot about that. When we went to fetch him, there was so much excitement about bringing him back here. It actually slipped my mind until she said, he asked about the 2 cubs, and then we've remembered there were 2 little young leopard cubs next door to him that came from Breytenbach, and they were sort of semi-wild. They weren't hand-reared, and it just slipped my mind. And when they talked about it, I couldn't believe, I actually did believe it. I mean, then I really believed that they were communicating.
And she communicated with him, and when we spoke to her and she relayed all the information back to us, firstly I didn't believe her. You know, it's things that anybody can think out, and you can think, And then she said something about the cubs that were with him. And that changed this whole thing, because now all of a sudden, you know, that's something that she didn't know about.
And I've also reassured him that you have no demands of him here, that you're quite happy to not make any physical demands of him or any expectations for display or interaction, that you're really willing to let him be how he wants to be. And that's given him an enormous sense of relief. Yeah. And having told him that has for the first time made him actually genuinely interested in now exploring a bit further. Now that he feels that he's not being asked to come out more, he's genuinely interested in being relaxed enough to have a natural curiosity come out and to actually expand his horizons a bit.
And Yeh was just stunned when the black leopard walked out of his night shelter into the larger enclosure later in the afternoon. In the 6 months that the cat had been here, Yeh had never seen him out of the night shelter. He then decided to rename the leopard Spirit.
We told him that same afternoon that we're not going to call him Diablo anymore. And we understand and we agree with that the diabolical side of it. That's not what he is to us. And we'd like to change his name to Spirit. As I walked to him, I thought, listen, he asked about the 2 young leopards. And I thought, well, I'm here now. There's nobody else here. I'm not going to look like a fool if he ignores me. I'll tell him what happened to those leopards. And as I called him and I said Spirit, and he was looking at me, he was lying like that. I said, with regard to the 2 little leopards, I just want to assure you and I want to tell you that they're safe. And I couldn't help it. I just said to him, wow, you're beautiful.
Beautiful. Oh, that's mooi. That's mooi.
And he gave me that, oh. And I thought, what's happening here? And I said to him, you understand what I'm telling you if I say to you that you're the most stunning cat?
Oh.
And I spoke to him and he answered me about 19 times. And he just sat there and he was totally relaxed. It's the first time since we had him that I felt at ease with him. I felt that he was relaxed and he understood me. It was, to say that I don't know what it feels like for him. For me, it was the most amazing moment.
Later that afternoon, Anna came back to check up on Spirit and to see how he was doing.
I'm asking him now about how he experienced the communication from Jochen through the fence. And he said it's the first time that someone has directly expressed to him verbally appreciation for who he really is, not how they see him to be. And that really surprised him. It shows me an image of literally stopping in his tracks by surprise at that sense of just this wall of appreciation coming towards him. He is so relieved that nothing's being demanded of him here. He's just so relieved. It's like this weight is lifted from his shoulders. And when he was grunting back, he said he was saying thank you for the thank yous. So for each thank you he was getting, he was saying thank you back. Is there anything you'd like to say about that feedback?
I think we'll talk about this a bit later. I can't listen. So we'll talk about this later. It's unbelievable. I'm overwhelmed. It's 2 different animals. It's 2 totally different personalities. We had a snarling cat, angry at everything, upset about being here, hating humans, hating us for having him here, ready to kill in an instant. To this relaxed black leopard that's lying on top of his log in his shelter is this attitude of, you recognize me for who I am now. And it's amazing to talk to him and get the talking and get him to talk back to us.
Yach and Karen attended Anna's workshop on animal communication and now use it regularly with all their animals.
It changed my whole life. And spirit and animal communication has taught me, when I work with my other lions, the reactions you get, the communication you get back, the feelings you get. Sometimes you get lions, or Queenie for instance, that's unhappy with something that happened. And I'm not sitting out there wondering what's wrong with her. She tells me, and I can correct it, and I can make her happy, because she is I have to look after her. I've got to make her happy.
So Anna, you have been back to visit Spirit. Would you like to give us an update?
Yeah, I made it a point to visit him, even though I was living in a different part of the country. I'd visit him a good couple of times per year. And he left his body about 5 months ago, in June of this year. And it was almost unprecedented lifespan for the leopard. In the wild, they'll live to about 10 or 11 years, and in captivity, usually 15 or 16 at the most. But he was 22 years old. And that's just virtually unheard of. In the end, it was cancer in the tail that had him leave the body. And he got to live out just a fantastic life. Where Jukani was set up physically, their location during the time of the filming that we've just seen, was in a quite inhospitable, very sort of arid part. And after I met Spirit and the other cats that they were taking care of, I introduced Jochani's wife to some folks who were running ethical sanctuaries elsewhere in the country. And a couple of years later, they relocated all 55 cats to a much better environment for them. And each of the cats had their own super large enclosure with natural vegetation and plenty of places to hide away from being seen by the public if they wanted to. In most of these environments, the animals are on public display all the time. The tigers at the new location, each tiger had their own forest, and company. And a few years after that, a zoo elsewhere in South Africa was shutting down and had 2 leopards, wild, very angry, aggressive leopards that they needed to find a place for. And these adult leopards, who were sisters, ended up at Jukani. Leopards are solitary animals, and it's a very bad idea to try to introduce adult leopards to each other. It will result in usually all of them being killed. They will fight to the death. But across the distance and between the fences separating them, there seemed to be nothing but interest between Spirit and these 2 sisters who were in an enclosure nearby. And so they called and asked me to communicate with all the cats concerned. And long story short, they were saying, well, we are the 2 cubs now grown up. Who used to know Spirit before, and they knew each other from before. So the sanctuary took the very brave decision to give them the opportunity to be in the same enclosure, and that went off absolutely smoothly. Nobody hissed and snarled or injured anybody else. And they all got to live out their natural lifespans, reunited essentially. There's some very mysterious sort of synchronicities that happened in the human world, completely unintended and unknown until the paperwork was being finalized months later. And the paper trail showed that these were in fact the 2. So he's been a very inspiring force for people to acknowledge that animals have their own truths, and that they perceive and pick up on how they're being regarded. It might have seemed like a good idea to call a black leopard, Diablo, because of the diabolical and the dark and all these dramatic things and all the meanings we make of the color black and of so-called darkness. And then we humans judge that to be worse than the color white and all these things. And these are all just human interpretations. So it wasn't that the black leopard could understand English or Spanish for that matter. And Diablo, it's not about the syntax of language, it's about the meaning and the quantum energy that comes with it. And when people were addressing him and telling the story of his sad, past and his reaction to it again and again, it was those projections that he was picking up on. Not that he understood the meaning of the word Diablo, but he knew that the associations with it were what were being projected and done from him the whole time. And he wanted to know of that. So this really calls us into a sense of responsibility for how we are viewing and thinking about our own animal companions. Do we give them credit enough to know that they are absolutely aware of our expectations, our judgments of them, us humans making them less intelligent than us, this kind of strange belief system that we have, and they are very aware of how we regard them or don't regard them.
Yeah, yes. You've talked as long as we're talking about how humans are perceiving things, you speak of humanity's separation sickness. And I think a lot of folks on this call, have a sense of what you're talking about. I mean, our perception of being separate from the web of life, from the family, that our kinship with other species, is we're unconscious of it. We're oblivious to it so much of the time. So tell me how, in your experience, animal communication or interspecies communication helps us heal as humans.
A lot of us have animals in our lives, consciously or unconsciously, to help us come more into our heart, to help us relate beyond our human relationships, which carry so much charge with them so much of the time. And so already the way we engage with animals is a lot more clean and a lot more pure from our side, because we don't have so many needs, wants, or expectations of them usually. So already just having pets is a very healing thing. For example, I mean, I don't do pet consultations at all. The last 10 years or so, I happen to focus exclusively on wildlife and nature and wildlife rehab and so on. But the same thing, could be said there, that even humans' enthrallment and enchantment with wild species is speaking to something that's calling our hearts into these experiences of connection. And we may not know that we're healing specific things, but we're certainly healing the distance that we've created between ourselves and the others, and quite frankly, often between ourselves and ourselves, really. And when we can connect with nature, be that the bird outside your window or the little worm on your path that you step over that morning, or the insect that you kindly remove from being stuck up against the inside of your window. When we do those small things, we're coming back into our own true nature. So connecting with nature, or the idea of the wild or another, might at first seem like there's it's something external to us that we want to benefit from. Even recreational use of nature, just the root of that word recreation, it is giving us an opportunity to regenerate and to recreate. But what it really does is bring us out of our human patterns back into our own nature, which is not separate. And part of that is, I can say that in my journey with this, I have found the animals to be some of my greatest mentors and teachers. Not conceptually, because they're not going to sit there and read to me from a sacred text, but their very states of being have been incredible role models. When you are in the presence of an animal, and I say presence deliberately, just their state of presence is enduring. That's how they reside, in the present moment. And when we can set aside our phone and our devices and actually just be present, even with our own pets at home, for 10 minutes, we come back into that state ourselves. We get to, unwittingly, we get to harmonize and rebalance to that energetic state that they're in. Because in the quantum field, everything is always in a state of adjustment and moving towards harmony, which is not some fixed point in a static way, but things are always interacting with each other. Energies in a room, energies between people and environments. And so when we are privileged enough to be in the presence of a non-human, and our energy is subtly adjusting to, more towards that. It also means that their energy is unintentionally adjusting, towards ours, which can make life a bit more chaotic for them and pull them out of this absolute blissful state. So we come back to ourselves, we come back to our own true states of being when we can be around those who are more naturally residing in those states, and on an everyday basis.
So because you have been cultivating this ability for so long, do you feel that it has fundamentally changed how you understand yourself as a human?
Yes, I've come down a notch or two off this pedestal that I had, or ideas that being human was more advanced than the others, or more intelligent. And even with the scientists who have proved telepathic communication, or those that still work in this field, there's still this sometimes this subtle sense that we are more spiritually evolved, or that we are more deserving, or that because we have cognitive skills, it means we're more intelligent. And I've come to really appreciate that all of life is very, very intelligent in and of their own expressions. They're just different modes of intelligence. So I've come to have also compassion for my humanness, for my sort of lostness as a human. I've come to, as I've already been speaking about, I've come to be able to role model on the animals, states of being, just presence and awareness, and also authenticity. They're just unashamedly authentic, and how things are for them, and they will express from that place. And I've learned too that we're not actually as separate as we might even imagine ourselves to be. We are in this quantum energetic entanglement, the whole time. And so it's taught me to, in a strange way, become more fully human, or step more into my sort of fully human birthright, which is one of connection and intricately being interwoven with the web of life. But it's also, this journey has brought alive again some of that childlike wonder for just the awesomeness of creation. And it reminds me of my favorite hymn as a child, all things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small. And there is this childlike sense of wonder and joy. I was late for a meeting this morning because I was watching a pigeon for 10 minutes. And the pigeon is new to the garden. And she was drinking, and I just wanted to see that she was physically well, because she had some feathers sticking out at strange angles, and I wanted to wait for her to take off in flight and to be sure that she was flying okay. But I wanted her to have her drink first. I didn't want to disturb her and force her to fly because I had a meeting. And just that 10 minutes with the pigeon is a beautiful expansion of my own sort of human orientation. I again am placed in relationship with the birds in the garden, and in relationship with place, and a sense of belonging that arises out of that is really, really, really fundamental, and feels very true. We don't have to make reconnection some mystical experience, or running around with a savior complex, trying to rescue every single being. When we come back into our own self and just be related to what's around us, we are more fully alive.
Thank you. I have one last question before we begin to wrap up here, and that is, you've touched on this already, but if people watching this want to sort of venture into this for themselves, you've talked about, going into the heart space, letting the thinking mind, I'm sort of elaborating here, but, letting the skeptical and thinking mind just chill for a moment and just see what people just see what comes intuitively. How do people, what would you tell people who want to really explore this?
There's probably two layers, and the first layer would be the sort of pre-existing conditions, like the states of being that you get yourself into deliberately, so that you can then embark on the second layer of perhaps a more intentional connection. But it does take a certain quality of openness and so on that's good to get into first, to just maximize the chances of having a clean connection, and for your own clarity's sake as well. And so even just unconscious things like our attitudes towards certain species, examine those. Think differently, like on a mind, sort of body and heart level. We need to be willing to adjust. We need to think differently about the animals, not believe they're less intelligent, ignore any expectations we have of that species, get over a fear of spiders or something, and just be willing to be free, be mind free, and just acknowledge them as sentient, self-aware, intelligent beings. In our own bodies, we need to be calm as well, like calm and relaxed in our own animal bodies. So be still, be quiet. And stilling and quieting the body will tend to make the mind follow, and the mind is the biggest obstacle to clear intuition. And then on the heart level, just spend a moment to be in your heart center, to have a feeling of compassion and openness. Being open-minded is on the conceptual level, but really being open-hearted is what allows for that meeting of essence to essence when we connect with another. So take the time to prepare, in a space that is free of distractions and doesn't need some complicated yogic process or mystical school training or anything at all. Just sit still and be quiet, be as empty as possible. Don't fight any thoughts that come, just let them pass through. And if you want to place your attention anywhere, let it be on your natural breathing rhythm, because I find that very presencing. Natural breathing rhythm just gives the mind something to do, seems that it sits on being busy anyway. But it allows to focus on something that you're presumably doing anyway. And it can be very calming. And then by simply opening your heart, you can choose to, intend to. The intention is the tuning fork that gets you there. You just intend to connect with the one that you're bringing to mind, or the memory of an animal that you saw. You don't have to be physically in their presence. This all works in quantum ways that are independent of distance. And it's all purely energetic. And once you're feeling calm and present and have opened your heart, you could imagine building a bridge to that animal wherever they are, or just send an energetic greeting, a silent greeting from your heart to theirs, like you would greet an old friend, even if it's the first time you're meeting them. And then, to help focus our perceiving mind on what might be true for an animal, it can help to have the filter of a question that we ask, just so that we sort of have a catch net to receive some data and to perceive some data. And it can be a nice open question, show me who you are, or what would you like me to know? If you do have particular questions about that animal, the circumstance, or what's troubling them, then ask that question silently in your mind, and imagine it just being this lovely, compassionate inquiry, this compassionate bubble that sort of floats across to them. The truth is, they will have perceived at the moment you have that intention and that curiosity in you, that's immediately perceived by them. So this is not a mechanistic process where it's going to take a while for the signal to land and then they're going to eventually think up an answer to send you. No, all of these things are just ways to bring our minds to the party. So having a question in you, if I'm walking down a street and come around a corner and there's a distressed bird, I don't have to sit down cross-legged, go into meditation to ask the bird, what's up? There's just this naturally arising curiosity and care for the bird's state just arises in me. And I will immediately feel on my body how the bird is feeling on their body if it's, physical injury. So your inner inquiry is what lands in their field. And then it's important to stay as empty and quiet as possible, to notice what you are receiving subtly. If there were a process, which there isn't, but if there were, it would be as if you are already just receiving the truth and the energetic vibrations and frequencies of their state of being and thoughts, feelings, etc. You're receiving that unconsciously at first, which means you don't know about it until it filters up through your awareness and runs against your own human mental database of stored, life experiences, vocabulary, words, physical sensations, etc. And when that incoming energy finds the closest match in your human system, that's when a word will come to your mind, or a mental image, or a feeling, or a smell, or anything. You don't have to predict or worry about how it comes. It'll just land in your awareness in some way. And so let these things come. If you're going to keep asking the same question 17 times, your focus is there instead of just being an open receiver. And one of the lovely ways to know that something's definitely coming not from your own mind is when you have a feeling of surprise, or when you get an idea and the first thing your mind says, oh, that can't be true, or I probably just imagined that. But that's the mind giving itself away as the interferer, because your mind's complaining about something. Therefore, it must have come from something, somewhere other than your mind. So notice these subtle things. Be light with it. Be open. Make notes if you wish that you can assess, afterwards. Just be open.
Because it's there all the time, right? So it's a matter of us clearing the cobwebs in our own being, in our own mental field, I suppose I would say.
Exactly. Some days I look at my cats and I say, I really regret being an animal communicator because I can literally tell what they want and need, and they know it too. So I'm like,
and now it's on you to respond.
oh, no, ignorance was bliss, but I can't claim I don't know.
Have you ever tried to convey to them how they might use the can opener, or what? I don't know how you feed them, but
it's a jolly good idea, actually.
they might need an opposable thumb.
Well, actually, we joke, but it raises a good point, is that communicating with an animal about what to do or desired behavior doesn't mean they're going to do it, because they are their own agents. They get to make their own choice. And a lot of people will mistake that for meaning the communication didn't work. Tell the dog to do something and then it doesn't. They're like, see, it doesn't work, or I'm no good at it. And no, the message was loudly received. Thank you very much. The dog just chose not to comply or cooperate. So we do need to bear that in mind.
That's
I
great.
can certainly recommend that people do, some online research. And my mentor's mentor was Penelope Smith, who is regarded as the grandmother of interspecies communication insofar as bringing it back again to modern times and making it again more available and accessible to us. Her website is animaltalk.net, and she has a fabulous set of resources on her website, including an international database of professional communicators who have signed up to a certain code of ethics that really speaks to this reverence. And in that database, you could find, other folks, other teachers, and just use your intuition to navigate these resources and do some home practice. Very quickly we build the muscle and could be having a whole lot of fun with it.
That's great. So Anna, tell us what your current projects are, and both, I know you're doing a writing project, but also wildlife projects, and also how people can connect with your work.
Yeah, I do pro bono wildlife consultations for situations that are happening or animals in distress, and as much as I can manage on my plate, but there's always a greater list than the time available. So those I do for free for non-profit organizations or rehab centers or reserves. We humans have put animals in a very difficult position, and just habitat destruction and less space for them And even the conservation areas and ecotourism rely entirely on money to, protect the animals. They don't seem to enjoy just the right to protection and freedom and space and habitat, just because it's a good idea. So that's what I do, and I used to run in-person workshops to earn the rent, but I don't do that anymore. And I'm very pleased to say I'm starting a year-long writing sabbatical to write the first book that I've wanted to get around to for a number of years. And through a spiritual education charity, I'll have the possibility to do that through a writing fellowship. And it's not going to be yet another how-to book, because there are so many good ones like that out there already. No need to reinvent the wheel. It's just going to be a collection of stories from my consultation career over the last 20 years. And I think the stories speak more loudly, for themselves and for the animals than somebody summarizing them, in a bunch of concepts again. So those will be stories from the consultations that I've been doing, pets in previous years and wildlife. And we'll see what that comes to. And the good news about the book is that when it is available, it's going to be completely free, zero price, in ebook and audiobook format. And I don't know if there'll be a print one or not, but certainly it'll be freely available to anyone in the world who wants to download it. And that just feels really good, that the voices of the animals can come forward and readers can have their own experience of it, depending on who finds them.
Yeah. And your website is animalspirit.org.
Yes, animalspirit.org is very out of date, and I've got the means to update it. So a more reliable place is probably the YouTube channel. It's just simply Animal Spirit in one word. And the YouTube channel has some more helpful resources, including previous interviews I've done, and a little Ask Anna series where I on occasion answer questions that have come in from viewers about some common topics and how to perhaps engage more consciously with things like, euthanasia, or obedience and training, and sterilization and things like this. So that series will keep going throughout the book writing period.
Yeah, great. Well, Anna, I have completely loved speaking with you. Thank you very much for taking the time. And I'm going to ask Joe to come back on now to lead the Q&A. And if any of you have a question, you can put it in the Q&A down at the bottom, or if you'd like to come on screen and ask your question directly to Anna, you can raise your hand. There's a button at the bottom as well. So I'm going to go off screen now, and I will still be listening, but I'm going to magically disappear.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you so much, Patricia and Anna, for that fascinating and enlightening conversation. So we're going to open it up now for a little bit of Q&A. And if you have a question, we encourage you to raise your hand. We do ask that you keep your question brief, or to a couple of minutes, so we can get to as many as we can. So we'll start out. I see Matthew has a question. And so Matthew, we're going to bring you on. If you would click on join as panelist, the button that you see on your screen, and also start your video, then we'll be able to see you and be able to get your question. So you need to start your video and click join as panelist and start my video. You got that? Well, I don't know. We might be missing him. Let's sometimes those things work and sometimes they don't. So let's try Monica. Monica, would you like to come on and ask a question? If you do, you need to click join as panelist, and then you need to start your video. I'm not clear what's happening here. We're having a problem. Well, for some reason, we're having a problem with the people coming on. Hang on a minute. All right, we're going to try one more, then we might go to the Q&A. So we're not seeing people coming on. Let's allow Heather to see if she would be able to ask her question. Oh, we're getting some now. Well, let's go back to oh, there's Monica. And there's Heather.
Hi.
Let's take it one at a time. Monica, I think you were first. Did you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Barely. Say something and let us see if we
Can you hear?
All right, what's your question?
Can you hear me? I'm Monica.
Okay, ask your question. Yes.
Yes, I'm so I'm so really happy to meet Anna, and I would like to know how I followed what she said today, and I gather a lot of things because I do something called art meditation, and usually is to listen, to learn, to listen to your intuition and to your heart more than the head. And I would like to practice this more. And I would like to know if there are any places in the UK or in Europe where you can go and learn more with the animals and be present, because I understand it's a lot to be present in your own body, and that makes the animal trust come out more.
Okay, let's give Anna a chance to respond to that. Anna.
There are no physical locations that I know of anywhere in the world where one can go to learn animal communication, where there are animals present. And there's no wildlife sanctuary or animal shelter or wildlife reserve that I know of anywhere in the world where they will allow people to come to practice this. It's a very sad reflection of humanity's unwillingness to acknowledge these intuitive ways of being with animals. And I think probably because it implies and would mean that the animals are actually as intelligent as us, at the very least, and that they have self-awareness and that they can communicate in these ways, in these quantum ways. So even all the wildlife work I do is often asked for in secret by somebody who on the quiet is coming and asking and keeping it a secret from their colleagues and is too ashamed to let their colleagues know that they're coming to ask for the animal to speak directly to another human. And that's just the way the world is. So there's no way one can physically go where there are animals present to do this. However, there are teachers, communicators that you can look up worldwide on the animaltalk.net website, and there you might find people in the UK who will offer weekend workshops, for example, or who might have events where you go to a nature park or something to practice for a day. So that's just the reality of things. I would say practice at home. You don't have to have animals in your own life, in your own living environment. Practice with animals of friends. If you want to measure your progress, then practice with animals who live with friends of yours, where you can ask things about their life that you don't already know the answers to, but you can check the answers with the human afterwards, if that's your interest, to get validation. But also just practice with animals where no validation is needed. Start chatting to the birds that you pass or the dogs that you walk past in the street. They will all see you and know you and be grateful for the conversation and friendship.
Thank you, Monica. That was a great question. And we'll go to Heather. You're on, so let's get your question.
Great. Well, first, I wanted to say that thank you very much for this past hour. It's been, I've been following you for some time, and it's really been an honor to be a part of this conversation. And so I really appreciate all of the information that you've shared with us so far. And my question is based on your years of communicating with several different species all around the world, if there's any overarching themes that they are trying to communicate to us that they wish that we knew or understood better.
Yes, they are. I must say one thing that always touches me immensely is the compassion that the non-human animals have for us humans. And beyond the way that our pets care for us or often help us heal or take stuff for us, I'm talking about the wild species in particular. There are many very, very large animals like elephants, whales, bears, who could do harm to humans if they wanted to. The humans who've actually made their lives a misery and have harmed them or traumatized them, as well as just humans in general. And I find it amazing that people aren't attacked. People, by the way, people are never attacked by sharks. There'd be a shark encounter. I find it amazing that people aren't attacked by sharks, or bears or mountain lions, that there's not this kind of vengeful trauma response either from the animals, because they have such compassion for how we've lost our way from ourselves. And despite the terrible effects and the collateral damage that is brought upon the wild species, they still don't react in a bad way. They have compassion for us. And another overarching theme is what they would like from us is for us to just reconnect again on an individual level. Of course, they would like more habitats and the peace and freedom to live their own lives, more widely. But they know, they're very present with what is. They know that the world is a very polluted place, air pollution, water pollution. They know things are like that and unlikely to change. But what they're asking for is for us as individuals to come back into our hearts and to just connect with them, being to being. And that gives them more joy, and it can give them a better emotional experience in their lives, even if their circumstances are terrible or constrained.
Thank you. That was a great question. We have another question here from, let me see, from Lori. Lori, if you would click on join as a panelist and turn on your video, we'll take a question from you. There you're coming. Okay. Okay, Laura, you're on. Let's have your question for Anna.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for taking questions and sharing all your wonderful stories. I have a dog. I hope I can ask something about her. She's a rescue. We've had 2 years.
May I just stop you there a moment? I'm not going to be doing an animal communication or anything in this webinar, just to be clear. So I won't be able to give specific advice to her.
Okay. Okay, so maybe you can just give me some advice on how to connect better with her. Because there's a lot of problems and I just don't know how to cope with her anymore.
Yeah. It can be the most difficult with our own animals, with those who live with us. Even for me, I'm often not the most clear with my own animals if there's a real issue going on. And because I'm so close to them, so for 2 reasons, I'm going to be clouded by what I already know, just my years of experience with them, by what I already know. And I can also be clouded by my wished for outcomes or the answers I hope I hear from them when I'm asking some tough questions. We're just too close to it sometimes. So I can advise that you do find, an animal communicator who could work remotely over email, who would be completely neutral, have no pre-existing influencing factors or knowledge, and then find out what's behind your dog's behavior. Because behind every behavior, there's a need that is trying to be fulfilled. And that's what gives rise to behavior, is some need or desire or motivation that the animal's trying to have met. And it might just be a simple tweak in the circumstance or in the household that can allow that need to be met in a more healthy way that's kind of more harmonious for everybody, including us humans. Or it could be that they have a misunderstanding or some habitual behavior based on a past trauma that would need a healing intervention. And the good news is that animals often know, they always know what kind of healing intervention they would need, even if it's not a modality that they have personally experienced in this lifetime before. They seem to somehow be tapped into the universal library of all possible healing modalities. And I've had cats with skin cancer ask for a certain kind of a crystal. I got a strong mental image of a crystal. And the cat's person freaked out because she didn't believe in crystals firstly, and had never had a crystal in the house. And here was her cat, had been with her since birth, asking for a certain kind of crystal. But she went and sourced one, and it turned out to have the properties that are specifically meant for blood cancers. So things are mysteriously available to animal awareness, and it can help to have a really independent third party check in around behavior or stress responses.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you,
Thank you.
Lori. Thank you very much. We have another question from Altira. If you would click on join as panelist, we will bring you on to ask your question. Turn on your video and unmute. See where you went here. There you go. There you go. Hi there.
Hi there. How are you tonight? I have two questions for Anna. One you have answered already, and so if it's just a referral to a website, you can just answer the second part. I'm currently in Cape Town, and I'm looking for Cape Town, South Africa, and I'm looking for some training in the area of animal communication and other things in relation to it. So if you know anyone you'd recommend specifically in this area, I'd love to hear it. And you can also just bypass that question and answer the more fun one, which is, I'm guessing animal communication is something of a window for you, and maybe you're looking at other skills. I'd love to hear what those are.
Sorry, did you say it was a window? Could you just
I'm guessing.
Yeah, could you repeat that last sentence again?
Sure. I'm guessing that animal communication was something of a window for you, maybe an opening to a journey. I'd love to hear more about your journey.
Yeah, it's an ongoing journey into well, this what we're speaking about is the non-separate self, and so the animal's authenticity and state of presence also really intrigued me to find out, like, how come they've got that and we humans have lost it, not just as a general belief that for myself. And so they did get me on the, should we call it, the spiritual inquiry of the non-duality, or Advaita Vedanta, and having quite a strong mind, that particular path happened to suit me, the path of cognitive understanding, mostly coming to understand what we're not so that we can reside more in that indescribable place of oneness, and that we all are. And so they really helped me get onto that path and find a spiritual teacher, a living master named Muji, who is a great guide in this way. And I thank the animals for modeling and being just that oneness that got me inspired. It's as if they are existing in that God self, in their natural state already. And there's other aspects to the journey that are to do with continual clearing. It's like layers of an onion, particularly working with the wildlife and some of the very distressing situations that they're in. And through communication, I come to literally know their distress and their trauma. And, in the situations where help isn't coming, or their environment is poisoned, or, the whales that are beaching, or the destruction, the wildfires. And it's no good for me to block that off, because, to know their truth, I need to be able to experience it. And then I need to get over having my reactions of, anger at the so-called perpetrators, or, despair. And so that was another whole journey that opened up for me, to look at my own internal reactions And that actually inspired an online course that I offered and co-created with a colleague. And we ran it first a couple of years ago, and it will be launched again at the end of this year. It's called For the Love of Animals, where our love for animals inspires us to really explore who we are, to become more and more clear of egoic things that stand in the way. And my colleague Brad is a spiritual teacher in the realm of egoic clearing and witnessing. And we talk about how to get over our inner reactions and distress and despair and unhelpful emotions when we are empathic and compassionate and coming into more heart connection with others, what that triggers for ourselves, and how to be healthy in all of that, and how to come from a more centered and holistic place. So that course will be advertised via my mailing list, which one can sign up for, and animalspirit.org. It's called For the Love of Animals. And Altara, I'll pop into the chat window a local resource you can look up in South Africa for animal communication workshop. Somebody who trained with me who I highly recommend.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Altara.
much.
Thank you so much. Let's see. We've got another question from David. David, could you click on join as a panelist and turn on your video and unmute? There you come. Okay.
So Anna, again, thank you so much for this talk. And I guess I'm curious about the elephants more so than anything else. I'm familiar with, as a longtime World Wildlife Fund donor, I'm familiar with that whole situation. But is there anything which, elephants being the largest, most impressive land animal, I suppose, and having their great reputation for wisdom and memory and so forth, anything above and beyond the norm that they've trying to tell us or have communicated to us or to a few of us that they would like to share in particular?
I've just come back a couple of weeks ago from Botswana, from the Okavango Delta, and being amongst the world's last metapopulation of elephants, and just wild camping, and just it's been amazing to be in their presence and in their acceptance. And the biggest thing they need is space, and they're very deeply connected to each other, to a sense of community. And so if there's one continuous message or invitation that they're offering, is for us humans to return to the community of life. And this is beyond any sort of self-interest that they may have, even collectively for their own survival and space. They are almost holding the energy of this community and this web, and to move as individuals in community and for the greater good of the community, and not just community of their own kind. This is part of the invitation, is for us humans to also extend our view and our lived experience of community to include the environment that we're in, to literally include the earth that we tread on every day. It could be between our front doorstep and the car or the subway station. It doesn't matter. We are related to that earth that's underfoot, and how we choose to walk. Do we walk with sensitivity to the ants we may be stepping on, or do we look down and pay attention and step around them? Do we choose where we place our feet? Do we choose to notice which plants are thirsty? Do we use our resources wisely? Do we recycle? This sounds like greenwashing, but it's not. It's the way that elephants move as well, appropriate to their environments with the minimum impact. And years ago, I came across a communication that was received from Elephant Consciousness by a lovely elder in this field called Dina Metzger. And it comes across as a poem when she transcribed it. It's called Mandlovu, mind, Mandlovu. Ndlovu being elephant in a lot of the African languages, Mandlovu referring to the sort of matriarch elephant. And this Mandlovu mind is, to me, the best human language-based expression of what it is to be elephant. It reads like a poem because it's so poetic in the essence it's imparting. And it's spoken in the voice of we. We are this large gray tribe, this unison of minds, and it's coming from elephant consciousness. But one line from that, I think, sums up best what elephants are inviting us to remember and encouraging us to live. And the line is this. They say, "This is our grace, to be an exact note in the chord that animates creation."
Ooh.
And if we as individual humans could just be that tuned in to the moment, exactly where we are, without any grand ideas about activism or change in the world, if we could just in each moment be an exact note in the chord that animates creation right now, then we're contributing our best to the web of life.
Very good. Thank you. Wow.
Very beautiful. Very beautiful. Thank you so much, David. I think we will ask Patricia to come back on and see if she has any other thoughts or last questions. We're getting near the time that we'd kind of set. We don't want to overwork Anna on her first visit, but she's been so gracious. Let me one question I came up with, it was sort of answered by David's question, and we can just do this briefly, and I want to see if Patricia has any last questions. I wanted to ask, versus when you were working with spirit, an individual animal, how it's different than when you're working with, say, an entire population of an animal, like you've worked with whole herds of wild dolphins. You know what I'm saying? Like a whole, I don't know what the name would be, but a whole species of animals that you've worked with, rather than a single animal. Kind of quickly, what's different about how you relate to that? How you go about working differently?
Yeah, that's a great question. I saw somebody in the chat was asking about bees as well. Connecting with an individual or a collective, like a hive of bees or a herd of dolphins or even a species. It's exactly the same so-called method, which is just a way to bring ourselves, our human minds, to the party. So sit quietly, imagine the target of your communication. It could be a group, it could be a species, it could be an individual, and just let your inquiry or your feelings or your greeting land there. So it's the same methods, but like just described with the elephants, the responses will come more in the feeling of the voice of we, not a clairaudient voice, but the feeling of we. And so nonetheless, that collective is aware of what's happening for certain areas of the population, or where certain dolphins might be more distressed in a certain part of the world. But the nature of what is discussed or shared is going to be less, it's not going to be one individual who's expressing their particular needs.
Right.
But it is a wonderful way to tap into what is needed for the health of the collective. For example, a beehive. You could just approach a beehive as a collective, not necessarily physically, and you could say, what is needed? What do you like most about your environment? Does anything need changing? What are your current needs? What's missing? What's working? And I had this happen when I was teaching at Findhorn Garden in the north of Scotland one year. While I was there, a very rare collection of bees arrived on a tree. They, in that far north climate, they're not so commonly occurring anymore, bees that is. And everyone was very excited to be able to perhaps invite them to stay, should they be willing to come into a catch hive and so on. But there were no hives available ready to put up somewhere to, try to lure them into. So, and we were rushing against the clock. Sunset was imminent, just a few hours hence. So I went to the base of the tree and communicated with the collective of the bees as a group and asked what they would need to stay. They were swarming, they were looking for a home, they hadn't found one. And I essentially asked them what they would need, what would be ideal. And they gave this whole list of design specifications for what they would want to stay. And it had to be facing northeast and just so high off the ground, and to get sun for so much of the day and have certain qualities to it. And bless them, the Findhorn residents, particularly those interested in bees, dashed around on bicycles and made a plan. 2 people went scouting for such a location as has been described, and Others set to work on hammering and nailing, bits of wood together. And within a couple of hours, we were shakily riding a makeshift beehive along to a location that met the criteria the bees had described on their list of wishes. And we went back to the tree the bees were in, and John Williner, the lovely elder and beekeeper, climbed this kind of tottering ladder with nothing but a cardboard box, which he held open in invitation. He just climbed up the tree. The ladder didn't quite reach all the way, and he didn't do any shearing or wiping or sweeping of bees. He just held the cardboard box out in invitation and asked that we conveyed that the place had been now made for them, that met their specifications, and they were invited to come. And the bees came into the box. We didn't know if the queen had come or not, just had to trust that she had. And we cycled the boxes of bees over to this new location. Didn't dump them in or shake boxes or do anything that is usual. We just simply built a little bridge between the capture box and the hive and opened up, and they walked the bridge into their new home and lived happily ever after.
That is truly fascinating. And well, in a way, not only that, but particularly what you said about elephants, when you're working with an entire species, it's almost like they can go beyond just saying what they need and give wisdom about what our planet needs. I was thinking of that when you were sharing the elephants' wisdoms. I mean, they're teaching us about what our whole planet needs, and that is so profound. Patricia, any last questions?
Well, I could be here, for hours, but we're not going to do that. It's already 9:30 where you are, Anna.
Yeah, it's bedtime for Anna.
I think that's a beautiful, beautiful story to end with, and it's all non-local. Everything is non-local, right? So we don't have to be in Africa to be conveying to the elephants our care and concern for them, or the whales, or any of the species that are under distress. And would you say that is a step in the right direction of us restoring
yes,
our
absolutely. In fact, one of the first things I did around elephants was years back co-creating the elephant prayer circle to hold space in a good way for elephants, given what they're going through. There's also a whale and dolphin prayer circle. You could look it up on Core Light. That's the website of the colleague with whom I do the For the Love of Animals course with. Core Light, CORELIGHT, corelight.org. And Patricia, you were saying we can convey our care and concern. We can convey our care. I'd be hesitant to say let's convey our concern, because that is on the quantum level, that's going to be contributing more concern into the mix. It's concern that motivates us to convey our care and compassion. And in the prayer circle or in intentions that we hold, we always focus on the positive manifestations and solidarity, support, freedom, safety, well-being. And us sitting wherever we are in the world, spending even 10 seconds on that is literally contributing that into the mix, into the cosmic mix. And it causes this ripple effect energetically that doesn't dissipate. So we are all contributing with our thoughts, our feelings, and our states of being in every moment. So let's make those good ones.
That is so inspiring. Okay, as we begin to wrap up, Anna, you had mentioned the online workshop. So will that be coming along soon on your website, animalspirit.org?
Yes, at animalspirit.org. It'll be announced in December. Yes, and it doesn't have specific start and end dates. It's evergreen. People can do it at their own pace whenever they wish to. So there's no time pressure.
Well, that is great. So we'd encourage, a number of people have asked, how they can go about learning more or get resources or training. So that would be one start. And so you can find out a lot of wonderful things and videos and so forth on Anna's website, animalspirit.org, plus, as she mentioned, on her YouTube channel. You can also learn more about Patricia's work, her We Awakening podcast, which is an excellent podcast on these subjects that you don't want to miss, and companion groups that she helps lead, and that's at patriciapierce, PEARCE.com. And lastly, be sure and check out the center's website. It's simply contemporarymysticism.org, where you find hundreds of past speakers, videos, groups you can participate in. So this has been an absolutely wonderful time together. It's good to feel like you're kind of part of the center family now, Anna, and maybe down the road we'll have you back again. And this has just been wonderful. And thank you, and thank Patricia, and thank all of you who were on with us, asked questions. Obviously, there are many of you here, and we can't get to all of the questions, but all of you who are with us, we're so grateful for you and glad that you're here. So we'll just say, be safe, be well. Until we meet again, remember, you're perfect just exactly as you are. Namaste. Bye, everybody.
So thank you.
God bless. Lots of love. Bye-bye.